What were the pyramids of Giza built for? Although the official explanation regarding the construction and use of the pyramids at Giza was that of tombs for the pharaohs, both the evidence and common sense suggests otherwise. It is an insult to humanity to expect us to believe that such precision craftsmanship and astronomical knowledge was created by Egyptian slaves with copper chisels and stone hammers. So what were they built for? Throughout the ancient world, astrology, astronomy, and metaphysics played a major role within the fabric and foundations of their society and social structures. They understood the delicate influence transiting planets had on human psyche, with each astrological age playing its part, offering a unique expression of electromagnetic influence over all those living under its wake throughout various epochs. This subtle blend of energies or frequencies emanating from the cosmos dictated what the flavor of each astrological age would be. Today we are going through a transit from the Piscean age into Aquarius. This changeover comes with its own unique shift in human consciousness, resulting in physical changes to all the old Piscean systems of social order influenced by its ruling planet through Jupiterian consciousness. 12,750 years ago, the Earth entered the age of Leo, ruled by the Sun. The Sun is the king of the zodiac. In the heart of Leo the lion, this was the Golden Age. The Sun is the energy source behind our focal consciousness, bestowing light and life to all in this physical reality. The characteristics of this Golden Age are reflected in the 5th house of the zodiac. It is the house of creativity, romance, and attention to detail. It is where human consciousness bursts out onto the scene in its full glory. Consequently, due to the overriding influence of the Sun, the whole of human consciousness would have experienced a dynamic lift into higher realms of Sun consciousness, leading to an advanced and creative civilization with great vision for all things of a physical nature. Is it the case that the pre-dynastic Egyptians during this Golden Age understood the delicate balance human consciousness had towards energies emanating from the cosmos during various astrological ages, and to preserve their heightened sense of awareness, which they were experiencing during this Golden Age of Sun consciousness? They produced an array of enormous structures which could artificially stimulate the stratosphere with the combined frequencies necessary to preserve the Golden Age indefinitely.
That's our reaction chamber. We get hydrogen. Why do we want hydrogen? Hydrogen is the signature of the universe. We need a little more energy to drive these granite beams to resonance than what we can achieve just in this small area. So in the Grand Gallery, we house a bank of resonators. And those resonators take those earth energies and convert those vibrations to airborne sound. And then that sound is focused through this opening and reverberates or drives this complex into a vibrating massive energy. This complex right here is totally freestanding within the Great Pyramid. The walls are freestanding from the core masonry. There's a gap on the outside of these walls. They're freestanding. The floor is freestanding. Those ancient engineers and scientists, they didn't want any damp spots. They didn't want any dampening. So the walls actually go down on the outside of the floor about 5 inches. So really we're talking about these master engineers, scientists, acoustic engineers. And nothing they did by chance. Everything was intentional. And so then I began to think about these granite beams above. And I came to the conclusion that those granite beams, they had to have actually tuned them to respond to a particular frequency. And really, just like piano strings, if you strike one and you undampen the strings, another one at a higher octave will resonate. The harmonic of that particular frequency will resonate. It will absorb the energy and respond in sympathy with it. And you can actually transfer energy from this lowest beam clear to the top beam if each of those beams is tuned to the same frequency or a harmonic of that frequency. And that is what I believe is happening. So that's the summary of the Giza power plant, really. That what we have is a source of energy, which is the Earth, coming through the Great Pyramid. We have the hydrogen generation here. We have energy collected here. We have a resonator hall that collects the energy. That energy is directed into this chamber. The energy of that chamber is raised to a much higher level. It affects the hydrogen in that chamber. The hydrogen is pumped to a higher energy state. And then what we have is an input signal coming in. Oops, wrong one. An input signal coming in, collected from the universe. That's the source of your signal. Coming in through this shaft into the chamber, you could have a tremendous buildup of energy. A lot of energy could be entrained with that input signal and then collected from this chamber and then coming up to the outside.
The majority of the limestone blocks inside the pyramid were made from a local limestone which contains crystal, allowing for the transmission of electrical energy within the fabric of the pyramid. The outer casing stones were made from white tufa limestone, which does not contain magnesium, giving it high insulating properties, preventing the energy inside from being released. The grand gallery and chambers were made from pink granite, slightly radioactive, containing 55% quartz crystal, which, when vibrated, creates electrical energy through what is known as the piezoelectric effect. Since the time of Christ, some records state that the capstone was missing. However, it is believed that this capstone was made from gold, a perfect conductor to focus the energy created below up into the stratosphere. The ancient Greek word pyramidos translates as fire in the middle. Around 11,750 years ago, there was a devastating cataclysm which threw the earth and most of its inhabitants into absolute chaos. But afterwards there occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune all your warlike men in a body sank into the earth, and the island of Atlantis in like manner disappeared in the depths of the sea, for which reason the sea in those parts is impassable and impenetrable, because there is a shoal of mud in the way. And this was caused by the subsidence of the island, Plato's Timaeus. Whether the cataclysm was a natural disaster or part of a spiritual battle between the Demiurge and humanity is a matter of debate. However, the result of the cataclysm weakened the pyramid's effectiveness, and unable to hold on to the energetic frequencies associated with the Golden Age, humanity's consciousness devolved into the realms of greater parity with the Demiurge, towards lower energetic vibrations. Was this the point at which the Demiurge, together with his fleet of Archons, took control over humanity and bred with the daughters of men? There were giants, Nephilim, in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. The offspring of which became the rulers and bloodlines of the post-Diluvian world, aware of the sophisticated technology left over by the Golden Age, which they kept to themselves in order to rule over the rest of humanity. This has been the status quo ever since. Successions of ruling bloodlines exploiting humanity while denying them their true history and heritage. World War II was not just an economical and military war. It was also a battle of ideologies concerning the origins of the human race. While the Anglo-American West promoted the theory of evolution, where all mankind descended from apes, the Germans, who at that time led the world in many aspects of science and manufacturing, promoted a different theory of human history, based upon the existence of Atlantis with an advanced pre-dynastic civilization. For this reason, the establishment today will never allow the remains of Atlantis to be publicized. It has to remain a myth, otherwise it gives credence to what German scientists were saying in the 1930s. Today, a new electromagnetic control grid is being established by our controlling classes, but instead of liberating humanity by submerging us in higher uplifting frequencies associated with the Golden Age, it is promoting a system of total control which could ultimately interface the whole of human consciousness with the Demiurge.
The automation of society has been underway for a very long time, slowly detaching humanity from their hands-on involvement over a system of control which they will ultimately become slaves to. When people give up their independence to interact within a community of proactive human participants, embracing instead a society of automatons serving an artificially created management system, their social cohesive skills will deteriorate to a point where the purpose of their overall existence comes into question. Some of us are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but spiritual beings having a human experience. And to dilute traditional three-dimensional ways in which we interact will ultimately trap us within a controlling web of artificial intelligence which will undermine our connection to spiritual consciousness, essentially detaching us from the Creator. 5G is the fifth generation of digital cellular network technology, designed to improve all forms of digital communication with greater speed when accessing the Internet. To achieve this, a wider spectrum of bandwidths are being made available for transmitting and receiving data. Utilizing higher frequencies within the lower realms of the infrared spectrum, known as microwaves. Although these frequencies are generally considered safe when emitting non-ionizing radiation, the potential for biological and cellular damage is becoming a growing concern. While microwave ovens utilize microwave technology to cook food, the level of power used to achieve this is enormous compared to the microwaves used within 5G technology. However, the accumulative and long-term effects on human health is unknown. It is already well documented in scientific research papers that the existing technology of 3 and 4G have already contributed to a number of health issues.
I'm Sharon Goldberg. I'm an internal medicine physician. I've practiced medicine for 21 years, and my background is mostly academic internal medicine, hospital-based, clinical research, and medical education. I am going to skip many of the things I wanted to say because I didn't realize it was only 5 minutes. Wireless radiation has biological effects, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and the peer-reviewed literature. These effects are seen in all life forms: plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is the precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. So 5G is not a conversation about whether or not these biological effects exist. They clearly do. There are 4 kinds of electromagnetic fields that we know are harmful to human health. So radio frequency radiation, magnetic fields, dirty electricity, and electric fields, okay? Our exposure, any given person, and all humans are affected by EMFs. Our given exposure has nothing to do with the research that my colleagues are going to cite with the National Toxicology Program. That is an assessment of the risk of 1 cell phone in the near field, okay? What is our exposure in a day? It's not 1 cell phone. It's cell phones, it's multiple wireless networks, it's smart meters, it's cell towers. It's this sandwich, and it all adds up. And this is a serious problem for occupational health, public safety, and personal safety. And I feel that it's irresponsible to be even talking about the Internet of Things and rolling out a new untested technology when we're not even measuring what are our current exposures from the current networks.
In my judgment, we already have clear evidence for elevations in brain and other cancers resulting from excessive exposure to mobile phone, Wi-Fi, and other sources of electromagnetic fields. There has not been adequate study of the adverse effects of electromagnetic fields in general, and there has been almost no study of the specific higher frequencies to be used in 5G. We are, as a species, about to undergo an experiment where all of us are essentially being used as guinea pigs for the profits of a handful of individuals running the telecommunications corporations. To roll something out on a global scale without adequate testing is akin to playing Russian roulette with the whole human race, an experiment which we may never recover from. After 5G, we should see 6G, an even more sophisticated technological control grid. 6 is, of course, the number associated with Saturn, the planet of control, restriction, limitation, and frustration. When they link all electronic devices, along with humanity, to their fleet of Saturn lights, there will be nowhere to escape to and nowhere to hide. This will no doubt be rolled out as a countermeasure against all forms of terrorism. It is ironic that the first ever geosynchronous satellite broadcast, which took place back in July 1962, carried pictures of Pope John the 23rd all around the world, a Saturn light which looked more like the Death Star from Star Wars than the satellites we are used to seeing today. Ever since the birth of man, we have lived in tune with nature's rhythms and cycles, responding to the energetic frequencies emanating from our surroundings, together with transits occurring from the magnificent planets and luminaries gracing our solar system. Lately, human arrogance has decided to submerge every one of us in an artificial ocean of electromagnetic pollution. This, in my opinion, is an attack on human consciousness itself, driving into the very heart of who we are. Creating an artificial reality which could potentially replace our natural subconscious collective, which is tethered to the spiritual realm and the Creator. I suggest that the overriding objective of this electromagnetic control grid is to cut us off from our sixth and seventh senses, together with restricting our connection to the spiritual collective, giving us over hook, line and sinker to the artificial machine-like god of the underworld, the Demiurge.
Over time, the ruling pharaohs of dynastic Egypt developed a reputation for cruelty and exploitation. As a consequence, Moses and the Israelites left their oppressive lives under pharaonic rule and headed east, across the Red Sea, towards the Holy Land.
What is it about the Holy Land that makes it so holy? Maybe there is a link between the ancient esoteric wisdom contained in the Kabbalah and land considered holy to the Jews, Muslims and Christians alike. There are a few clues within both the Kabbalah and some old written descriptions concerning this matter. Is it possible that during the early development of the Kabbalah, a physical area of land was adopted to represent the Kabbalah's metaphysical components, incorporating Jerusalem and neighboring areas as the supernal triad or Godhead? Leading from Keter, the crown Sephiroth, is one of the longest pathways between two energy centers. This pathway is known as Gimel, a Hebrew word which means camel. This path from the divine spirit of Keter to the sun Sephiroth, Tiphereth, terminates in the middle of the Tree of Life. Could this be the true origins behind the name of the city Medina? Before the 20th century, the only practical way to travel from Jerusalem to Medina was by camel, across what was referred to as an abyss, an inhospitable and barren desert region which made for a long, arduous, sometimes dangerous journey between the two cities. I suspect it is more than just a coincidence that in Kabbalistic terms the area beneath the supernal triad is also known as the abyss. South of Medina is Mecca, an ancient trading city and the home of the Kaaba. When Muhammad took over the city with his victorious Muslim army, he threw out 360 idols from the Kaaba in favor of a meteorite which possibly fell to Earth from Venus as it changed orbit thousands of years ago. Before this, Muhammad circled the Kaaba 7 times. Was he paying homage to the 7 lower Sephiroth before dedicating the Kaaba solely to the worship of Venus and the 7th Sephiroth, Netzach, the Sephiroth of victory? Continuing south, there is a city called Sana, a female name meaning to shine or glow. Could this represent Yesod, the Sephiroth ruled by the moon? At the lowest point in the southwest corner of Arabia, we find the city of Aden, a Somalian word for Adam, who represents the earthly kingdom of Malkuth. Back in the supernal triad, the Sumero-Akkadian name for Jerusalem, Oru-Salim, means the foundation of the god Shalem. The name Israel is made up of a triad of its own, Isis, Ra, and El. Could this be a reference to the supernal triad within the Kabbalah? The pathway between the crown Sephiroth, Keter, and Bina, the messianic Sephiroth, is known as Beth. It is described as the first action in the creation process, the beginning of duality, where the creator initiates the created. Coincidentally, the place of birth for Jesus, the Messiah of the Piscean age, was Bethlehem, only 9 kilometers south-southwest of Jerusalem. Is it the case that our Kabbalistic ancestors throughout the Middle East saw Israel and the Hijaz as the physical earthly expression of the Tree of Life, with the Red Sea separating themselves from Egypt, which they could have regarded as the physical manifestation of the Tree of Death? The fact that the name Suez is Zeus, Jupiter spelt backwards, could give some credence to this proposal. When revisiting the story of Exodus, where Moses parted the Red Sea to save the Israelites from the Egyptians, it could, in this context, be considered as a metaphorical explanation of a person's journey back up the Tree of Life after seemingly becoming trapped down among the cliphotic gods and demigods associated with the Tree of Death. The name Red Sea also has a metaphysical significance. which could represent a metaphorical crossing from one tree to another, a symbolic barrier. Red is the colour synonymous with seduction, the underworld, and objects moving away from one another, as in the Doppler shift effect. In this case, it is the creature moving further away from the creator. Is it the case that thousands of years ago, the Demiurge and its demonic creations ruled parts of the ancient world, a world of megaliths, giants, and various godlike entities requiring human obedience, respect, and sacrifice? Once monotheism in all its forms evolved, using the knowledge of the Kabbalah, humanity found a way to escape the bondage and desolation found within the tree of death. By understanding their relationship to the Creator, through the use of the Kabbalah, they were able to free themselves by crossing the Red Sea and ascending up the tree of life towards a more righteous and optimistic path. If there is any credence to this idea, it means that the ancient knowledge of Kabbalism has been around for thousands of years, giving Muhammad his unique perspective on how to unify his people and promote them up the righteous tree of life, focusing on the Sephirot of victory. If the Holy Land and the Hijaz represent the tree of life and the path to spiritual enlightenment, then we can assume Egypt, the land west of the Red Sea, to be an area associated with the tree of death, its cliffots, and all those pathways which lead to the Demiurge. Egypt in Arabic is Misr, meaning country with government, laws, and order. The Quran also refers to Egypt as Misr, the country with government. Mizraim is an old name for Egypt, and being the son of Ham and grandson of Noah, Mizraim's offspring led to the Hamite branch of Noah's descendants. The name Egypt also comes from the Greek Egyptus, which is the Greek way of pronouncing Hort Ptah, a name which means temple of the soul of Ptah. According to some scholars, Ptah was the ancient Egyptian demiurge of Memphis, the god of both craftsmen and architects. In the triad of Memphis, the old capital of Lower Egypt, Ptah was the husband of Sekhmet and the father of Nefertum. This triad is similar to the supernal triad at the top of the Tree of Life, but this path leads to the rulers of the Tree of Death, down into the arms of the Demiurge via Satan and Moloch. The ancient Egyptians used the name Kemet as the name of their country. This translates as Black Country, with the people referring to themselves as Remech en Kemet, meaning people of the Black Country. Although Orthodox historians regard the term black as a reference to the colour of the soil on either side of the Nile, could it be that the true meaning behind Black Country is really a reference to the dark side of esoteric mysticism and the Tree of Death? Although Egyptian society lasted thousands of years, it eventually degenerated through the abuse of black magic, with the pharaohs becoming tyrannical over their subjects. Around 700 BC, when the city of Memphis became the administrative capital of a united Egypt, a text known as the Memphis creation myth was written. In this myth, it states that Ptah, who was regarded as the god of the earth, created 9 other deities, referred to as Ennead. This is quite astonishing when considering there are 10 Qliphoth within the Tree of Death. Consequently, it is possible that Ptah and his Ennead are the Egyptian equivalent of the 10 Qliphoth. Once the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea, they were made to wander the wastelands of the desert for 40 years, until those who had done evil things had died. In traditional Judaism, it was customary to only allow men over 40 to study the Kabbalah. The reason being is that in order to fully appreciate its esoteric wisdom, only the mature mind of the 40-year-old was capable of comprehending it.
Is it the case that during the golden age of Islam, with the creation of the House of Wisdom, they discovered ancient records and knowledge which helped promote their empire? And is it the case that the lost history of the Tartarians was part of that empire, an empire which has progressively been undermined?
There was a race of people known as Tartarians, which many historians know little about. Some speculate that they were once a great and sophisticated empire, stretching from the Caspian Sea all the way to the Pacific. Old maps clearly identify Tartary, or Great Tartary, as a huge landmass. Its people were described as Turkic, an ethno-linguistic culture found throughout Asia, North Africa, and parts of Europe. Tartary had its own flag, their own kings, and their own language. Because Tartary was so big, it was often divided into manageable sections with a prefix denoting the ruling power for that area, creating Russian Tartary, Cathay or Chinese Tartary, Central Tartary, and Eastern Tartary. According to official history, as the Europeans and Eastern cultures of Mongolia and China mixed with the Tartarians, the term fell into disuse, replaced by what we see today. Cathay or Chinese Tartary, which included Xinjiang, Mongolia, Manchuria, and Qinghai, most of which were not within the protectoral proximity of the Great Wall of China, suggests that the Great Wall was built to keep out some pretty fierce competition, separating ancient China and Tartary. Maybe these Tartarians were related to the original three-dimensional Aryans who appeared during the Age of Aries, descendants of some of those who survived the Cataclysm which wiped out Atlantis. This is interesting because in Herodotus's histories he talks about a people called Atarantians. Could he be referring to the Tartarians, possibly descendants of the Atlanteans? In the book History of the Two Tartar Conquerors of China, published in 1854, it states, "For in that same year, 1651, Chung Chi, the youthful heir of the late Tartar conqueror, being declared of age, assumed the reins of government at Peking, and the Tartars, impatient of completing their conquest, made a desperate attack upon the southern provinces. Yun Li was vanquished, and both he and his youthful son perished. Helena was led captive to Peking, and the imperial race of the Ming became extinct. The emperor himself was anxious to take lessons of him in mathematics, and at his request Verbest made himself master of the Tartar language, in order to dispense with an interpreter in communicating his instruction. The maintenance of the military character of the Tartars, by which their final establishment on the throne of China was secured, was in a great measure due to the emperor's frequent hunting excursions beyond the Great Wall, thereby exposing them to fatigues and dangers in many respects analogous to the trials of actual warfare. According to the Internet Encyclopedia, as Mongolian control in the West weakened throughout the 15th century, the Kazan Khanates took over and its people became known as Tartars. They were eventually conquered in 1552 by Russian forces under the reign of Tsar Irvin IV, becoming the first Muslim subjects within the Tsar's empire. The Internet Encyclopedia, encyclopedia.com, states that after the Bolshevik Revolution, Tartars were targeted for extermination. In the 1920s, most Tartar leaders and intellectuals who wanted independence were eliminated through execution or exile. This policy against the Tartars continued to some extent until the early 1950s. It is important to point out, as the victors write the history books, they occasionally try to eliminate important aspects which they see as counterproductive to their own importance. In 1999, a CIA document was released into the public domain, written in 1957, suggesting that the Soviet government set out to erase certain aspects of Tartarian history from the official record, essentially rewriting history to suit their agenda and modern narrative. Let us take the matter of history, which along with religion, language and literature constitute the core of a people's heritage. Here again the communists have interfered in a shameless manner. For example, on the 9th of August 1944, the Central Committee of the Communist Party, sitting in Moscow, issued a directive ordering the party's Tartar Provincial Committee to proceed to a scientific revision of the history of Tartaria, to liquidate serious shortcomings and mistakes of a nationalistic character committed by individual writers and historians in dealing with Tartar history. In other words, Tartar history was to be rewritten. Let us be frank, was to be falsified in order to eliminate references to great Russian aggression and to hide the facts of the real course of Tartar-Russian relations. And this was no isolated case. In every Muslim area within the USSR, historians, on orders from the Communist Party, have rewritten history to distort the facts so that the Russians appear always in a good light. Needless to say, histories which present the facts truthfully have been withdrawn and destroyed, so that the present and future generations of Muslims are forever denied the chance of learning the true facts of their nation's past. When considering that the Bolshevik Revolution was partly financed by the international financial cartel, it opens up a whole avenue of historical deceit. Our history really could be, as Napoleon suggested, a set of lies agreed upon. There is speculation among some historians that the official narrative concerning Napoleon's invasion of Russia is not entirely true. Some speculate that the real invasion of Moscow was a joint venture between Russia and France against the Tartarian Empire. They make this claim because St. Petersburg at the time was the capital of Russia, not Moscow. Consequently, if Napoleon wanted to take Russia, he would have gone straight to its capital. Instead, he chose to march on Moscow. After the German National Socialists came to power in 1933, a strong relationship developed between themselves and the Iranian Shah. A great deal of trade took place between the two countries, with almost 50% of Iranians' overall trade being with Germany. The Iranian people were immune to the German racial Nuremberg laws because of their Aryan heritage. In 1935, the Shah asked the international community to refer to the country as Iran, land of Aryans, instead of its Western adopted name of Persia. In 1939, Germany gave the Iranians a library of over 7,500 books relating to German science and the close relationship between the two Aryan cultures. Because of these close ties and volume of trade taking place between Iran and Germany, the Allies put pressure on the Shah to scale down his dealings with the Axis powers. Trying to keep all sides happy, the Shah promoted his country as neutral. Unconvinced of this, the Allies invaded on the 25th of August 1941 in a joint Anglo-Soviet attack on Iran. 3 weeks later, the Shah and any pro-German government officials were asked to resign. The Shah's son replaced him as head of state, allowing the Allies control of the country's oil fields. Between the 28th of November and the 1st of December 1943, the Tehran Conference took place, the first time the big three Allied leaders had met together during the war, to discuss future strategy concerning a second front against Germany, and also the need to recognize Iran as an independent country. Of all the places in the world to hold a conference discussing the defeat of the German Nordic Aryans, one can't help but feel that Tehran, in the heart of the land of Aryan, was not just a random coincidence. Although the United Nations debate on the race issue and its origins was settled in 1950, concluding we are all from the same species, and as Europe and Western sovereign nations undergo the controlled demolition of its individual sovereign nations, one can't help but speculate as to who will next be eliminated from the history books.
The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence.